Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me welcome Prime Minister Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, um, to Barbados formally. I feel as though I'm just letting a brother know that he's back home. But I want to welcome you, members of the media, to this encounter. I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of you over the course of the next 2 days. This afternoon, however, before we start, there is a matter of a signing of an agreement between the government of Barbados and the government of Trinidad and Tobago related to a framework treaty for the unitization of our hydrocarbon reservoirs that extend across the delimitation line. I'd like to invite Prime Minister Rowley first to address us, and I will speak to you after he addresses us. But before he addresses us, I'd like to invite both of us to sign the agreements that are before us, and then we will explain to you what these agreements are for.
I've done that myself.
Today's what?
Today's 16. What date you want?
17th of February 2020. Very fancy. It's still very fancy. That's yours to keep. That's yours to keep. Please.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Motley of Barbados, members of the Government of Barbados and Government of Trinidad and Tobago, members of the media of Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, visitors all. What you have just witnessed is a very significant step forward and development between two very friendly nations, Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. We, at the level of Prime Ministers of both territories, have signed a unitization agreement. It means that as we proceed to explore for hydrocarbons in the geological formations offshore, where our borders meet, we acknowledge that the geological history of the area recognize no borders between both Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, and whatever exists might run across these borders. And in searching for it, we start with seismic surveys. And those surveys are best done without constraint by borders. For example, recently in Trinidad and Tobago, one company, BHP, has just done a very large survey from which we in Trinidad and Tobago are benefiting now in guiding our exploration offshore. And we come up against the Barbados border, and we are of the view that as we explore the territories, we should be able to do so without the scientific work being constrained by a line in the sea saying that this is Barbados, this is Trinidad and Tobago. However, if we do find hydrocarbons, as we anticipate that we would, given the geological prospects that we have been noting, it would be easier for us to be able to explore, to exploit, to produce and to market any such product if we do it together. And that's why it's called a unitization. This is an international arrangement, an international approach where if a reservoir of hydrocarbon exists on the border, meaning that a part of it exists in Barbados and a part in Trinidad and Tobago, no one country can then exploit that reservoir on its own because it's connected to the rest of the reservoir in the neighboring territory. So what normally happens is that both countries have to come together, determine the nature of the reservoir, its resource base, and then agree to exploit it together, as we have been doing it with Venezuela, where we do have resources that cross our border. However, the unitization approach is something that in Trinidad and Tobago we have observed can take a very long time. So even after you find the resource, the unitization, which is the political agreement to exploit, it might involve the government, it might involve foreign companies or local companies, but it can take a long time. We have been working on a unitization with Venezuela for almost 20 years after we had discovered the Loran Manatee and other fields on our southern border. And we have been working on this for almost 20 years. And then recently, Venezuela got itself sanctioned by the United States, and that puts an end to that, because after 20 years, the Venezuelans cannot now move in the way that we were hoping from the first day we started out. So we have just got agreement with Venezuela, which is very significant for Trinidad and Tobago, saying, we agree that you can go ahead and exploit on your side, and we will do on our side. But that's a very unusual development, and it usually takes good cooperation between countries. What we have just done here a moment ago between Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, where Trinidad's acreage is now being exploited, the seismic work is being done, the exploration wells are being drilled right up to the Barbados border. We are now saying, in the event that we do find hydrocarbons across in Barbados, and also in the event that the company is doing seismic work, it will do it into Barbados territory, and from Barbados into Trinidad and Tobago's territory. And of course, if God smiles on us, and we do find hydrocarbons, oil or gas, probably most likely gas, that we have now this moment agreed to operate on a unitized basis, and the two countries will work together, designate the operators for such a resource, and very quickly we can move towards its exploitation as long as what we have found is commercially viable. And what that means is that the expertise from Trinidad and Tobago, the international companies that are now in Trinidad and Tobago are not present in Barbados now, can very confidently proceed to explore and invest. And whoever is on the Barbados acreage can do the same thing from the Barbados side. Fortunately, one of the companies operate both in Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago, and that would make it even more attractive that they can now operate in the full, without restriction, across the territories. And hopefully, this will encourage exploration in the deep water, which is where we are now looking for the bulk of our future resources. And if we do that, we can accelerate ourselves towards a point where we can monetize at the earliest possible date whatever we may find on this acreage. And this is a level of cooperation between Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, which we have as our vision, as Southern Caribbean people, our history working together, and now time is of the essence, because our economies demand that whatever might be out there, we need to know as quickly as possible and exploit efficiently and effectively and sustainably as quickly as possible. Prime Minister?
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister Rowley, for giving context. Prime Minister Rowley, as you know, is an eminent geologist and will have a greater appreciation on these technical issues than any of us in this room. But let me say that this is exactly as he has indicated, the deepening of an integration movement, but within the integration movement, people looking to even carry it further and to treat each other truly as kith and kin. In these matters, certainty is required if we are dealing with commercial risk. And to that extent, there is nobody who would undertake commercial risk without having certainty. We are now, as two sovereign states, given all of the persons who will be seeking to exploit on either side of the line the certainty that they need in order to be able to spend their money to do these things. Prime Minister Rowley spoke extensively on the seismic work, and the truth is that in order to have the kind of accuracy that gives them greater comfort, the larger the acreage, the better it is for them. And it makes no sense us trying to do all of our things on our own and Trinidad trying to do all of its things on its own. Let me go back to the essence of the integration movement. The essence of the integration movement is that as a community of sovereign states, we agree to treat each other better than we treat anyone else from outside of the region. Against that background, it is unquestionable that Trinidad and Tobago has the deepest and longest experience in the oil and gas industry in the Caribbean community for over a century. And it is against that background that we recognize that within the context of what we have established as our jurisdiction, we want now to share and to cooperate. And as I said, when we met in this very room in August, when we signed the negotiation, we signed the memorandum of understanding, which was non-binding and which was negotiated as the first step in really what is a three-step process. Today, we sign now the unitization agreement that will allow us now to move, if we ever need to individual unitization agreements that will set out now the commercial terms upon which we will share anything that is going to be exploited. But for the purposes of the seismic work, this unitization framework treaty is absolutely critical to allow the work to continue. Should anything be found, then we go now to the next stage, which is the individual unitization agreement that works out the details. Now, I say this against the background that, and I want to thank both of our ministers for allowing us to be in this position to sign this afternoon. But I say so against the background that Minister Abrams and his ministry would only have, in the course of last month, signed an effective exploration license for BHP on the basis of 2 blocks that were awarded to them, regrettably, as far back as December 2008. That it has taken this long is an amazing fact, but I've learned that our eyes are in the front of our head and not in the back of our head. And with the signing of that effective exploration license, it now allows them to move to the kind of seismic work that they need to move in order to be able to do what has to be done. And as I understand it, it is an 8-year license, with the first 3 years being a mandatory period of 2D seismic, then they have an optional period of 3D seismic, and then they have obviously the opportunity to drill for the last 2 years. And I assume that they can abridge their times within, but the bottom line is that upon signing that agreement, there would also be the triggering of a signature bonus, which will be paid into the Barbados Treasury within 30 days of the signature of that agreement, and we should therefore be receiving 11 million Barbados dollars before the end of February, that I'm sure that all Barbadian taxpayers will be happy to receive. We see this as the definite turning of the corner. We are new to the block, but we believe that in working with our family and our partners in the region, and I speak now not only just of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, but we recognize that as we go into the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting tomorrow, that we would like to be able to see greater cooperation within the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas on the areas of energy, be it fossil fuel related energy or be it renewable energy, as we face the existential threat of climate crisis. Against that background, Trinidad has always had the lead on the Energy Task Force, and we are very supportive of them continuing. And I hope that during the course of the next few months that we will be in a position to recommend to heads a framework, because as we currently speak, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas only refers to energy, perhaps I think in one specific sentence that is substantive, and that is simply that we will do our best to exploit the resources. But we have a situation now in Guyana where they have proven reserves, they believe, of over 8 billion barrels of oil, or its equivalent. Grenada has also been successful in being able to find also that they too, that they have matters, just to be absolutely precise, a significant hydrocarbon discovery they found in 2018. In Jamaica, they have been working offshore as well. In the Bahamas as well. And I've just indicated the effective exploration licenses on 2 blocks, namely the Carlisle Bay block and the Bimsha block in Barbados. And we have another block that was awarded to Repsol earlier on that we are still awaiting action on that one. It is likely, and this is what I mean by being wise enough to know when you need to take heed. We will not seek to put all of our blocks out at once. And we've learned from Trinidad and Tobago in that respect. And to that extent, therefore, even though we will be doing a few more this year, we are literally going to wait, because there's a difference between negotiating from proven reserves to negotiating in anticipation of reserves being found. And if we are to be fair to future generations who are yet unborn, then we need to make sure that we can maximize that which is available to them by negotiating from the strongest position of power that we can. This is what happens when you share information and you share expertise. If not, we might have been tempted to go headlong into giving out as many as we can now because of the race that is on for fossil fuels. We believe that this will therefore inure to the benefit of the people of the region. And as we go into this Heads of Government meeting, what is it that we're really trying to do? To make sure that we keep people at the center of the integration movement, benefiting in real ways, but recognizing that you don't reap corn without planting the seeds. You don't reap corn without tending to the crop and making sure that it has water and, if necessary, fertilizer. So to that extent, this is a work in progress, and we look forward. I think the next time, in fairness, Keith, I may have to sign in Trinidad, because you've now done 2 signatures in this room here in Barbados.
Yeah, I thought you had an agreement happening signing in Tobago.
Well, that's even better, because it will bring back memories. Against that background, though, there's another announcement which Prime Minister Rowley and I would wish to make, and this one is not on energy, but the deepening of the relationship. We live in a time where fiscally it is difficult all around, but by the same token, more importantly, we are pursuing efficiency where we can. And to that extent, we recognize that if we can work together in as many areas as possible to the benefit of the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, then we will have added value to them. And Keith, I'll allow you as a senior Prime Minister to make the announcement, please.
Well, we have been looking to see where we can cooperate more effectively in every possible area, because it makes sense that where we work together, we're stronger. And our discussions have taken us to a place of agreement where Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados have agreed to share some of our missions abroad. At the moment, Trinidad and Tobago has a mission in Nigeria, and Barbados is just about to operationalize its mission in Ghana, where Trinidad and Tobago has significant interest. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way to Ghana in a few days' time, having been invited to be the guest of honor at the celebration at the end of the year of return at Ghana's National Day. We also have interest in energy, commerce, culture, and diplomacy. So what we've agreed to do, finally, is that where we have missions in that part of the world, that Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados will enter into a memorandum of understanding where we would share a mission per country, which means that each country will have a larger number of footprints, and meaning that where Trinidad and Tobago is present in Nigeria and Barbados is not, that we operationalize that mission as a Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados mission. And where Ghana has a Barbados mission, it will be operationalized as a Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados. The arrangement that we seek to put in place is that the High Commissioner would be serving for 2 years, and for example, we have a High Commissioner in Nigeria now, and the senior person would be a Barbados person. We'd share the cost of the mission and we share the staff. When Barbados operationalizes in Ghana, there'll be a Barbadian in place with a senior Trinidad and Tobago second in command and sharing the cost. We look further. Trinidad and Tobago has a mission in South Africa. Barbados does not. If we use the same model, then it would give Barbados access to South Africa, sharing a mission with Trinidad and Tobago in Cape Town and on a similar model. And Barbados has worked with a lot of work in recent times to have opened the door for us in Kenya. Trinidad and Tobago used to have a mission in Kampala, which we have since downgraded and removed. So with a mission in Kenya, which Barbados will lead, we would share with Barbados in Kenya, and we take the model outside of Africa to Korea, where we need to be, and South Korea, of course. And we use that model of sharing accommodation, staff, costs, and benefits. So in the not too distant future, these missions in this part of the world will not be single nation missions, but the mission of Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados in the same location, and allows us to cover all these countries by country, but sharing it with our sister country Barbados. And we've agreed to do that.
And of course, Abu Dhabi.
And of course, as we look towards the UAE, where both countries have recently made steps, and we have not operationalized our decision. But now that we are making this step, we would do it in a sharing arrangement with Barbados to allow us to have a presence and diplomatic effect in the Emirates. And we think this model will go a long way in bringing us a lot closer and sharing our diplomacy going forward in the years ahead.
I want to thank Prime Minister Rowley, because I believe that for those who are young, you may be forgiven if you have forgotten that in 1966, Barbados' High Commission in London was shared with Guyana. And therefore, this is not anything that is unknown to sovereign nations and to ourselves as a sovereign nation. I can understand that at the beginning of independence, there was a greater desire to establish preeminence, and especially in markets where we have large diasporic populations who are there. But as Prime Minister Rowley said, in areas where, in this global village, we are required to be present, but we may not necessarily have the capacity to go on full throttle on our own. It makes sense because in any event, on many of the foreign policy issues, we are aligned with respect to our positions. It does not in any way diminish the role of capital. but at the same time, it allows us to be far more effective because small states need commercial diplomacy. In Trinidad and Tobago's case, Republic Bank, many of you may not know, has over 41 branches in Ghana. And to that extent, therefore, there is a strong Caribbean bank that is there. As Prime Minister Rowley said, for us, we had to make decisions. Initially, do we go into Southern Africa? Do we go into East Africa? In the end, Barbados took the decision for East Africa because in Nairobi is the largest amount of UN headquartered and UN agencies in the south of the world. And UN Environmental Program and UN Habitat that deals with housing are both located in Nairobi. To that extent, therefore, we chose there, but we felt strongly that we needed to have a presence in South Africa. We can now do this by sharing the missions that we've spoken about. And in both the case of Ghana and Kenya, both of those will be operationalized this year. In the case of Abu Dhabi and South Korea, we see that as the third wing for us, because we recognize that we cannot continue to only have a North Atlantic focus if we are going to bring sustainable benefits to our people who are in fact ahead of us. And traveling, when we were in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, I was surprised at the number of Caribbean people who are already there. In fact, one of our meetings with the major port company, as we walked in the meeting, a Barbadian greeted me at the door, who is in charge of the human resources of that particular company in Dubai. In the words of previous leaders, we are only going where our people are already carrying us. And we have a duty as heads of government in order to be able to make legal and real, and judicial, what our citizens have already made real by their participation in various forms of activity. And that is what I mean when I say that we have to keep people at the center of the integration movement. I think that
there's something that we need to let you all know as well. There are some serious diplomatic initiatives to be made in the months and years ahead. The ACP, its existence, its replacement, is of great importance to us. African, Caribbean, Pacific trading agreements, which are now on the table, and the Caribbean needs to have a stronger diplomatic presence and a stronger diplomatic backbone and profile. To do so, Caribbean nations have diplomatic potential working with the OAU nations. So we need to have a presence in Africa so that as we negotiate for the Caribbean, between the gears of those who would see us as nuisances, if we are aligned and associated with the countries of the OAU, which our missions will do for us, we will be in a much stronger position to defend the benefits that ACP cooperation and similar kinds of international diplomacy can hold out for Caribbean people. And of course, the Asian countries, we have significant trade relations with them. And in order to protect the gains that we have made and to ensure that we're not being left behind and referred to in the most derogatory terms by those who we might rely on or have been relying on, we have to find friends and neighbors and cousins, and Caribbean nations have them in Africa. And we are working very hard to ensure that diplomatically we make full use of the strengths that we can earn if we work together with the many tens of nations in Africa who see the Caribbean as part of a diaspora, which they acknowledge in a much different way now. As I just mentioned, Ghana for the last year, the president of Ghana has traveled around the globe, touching base with African diaspora people, indicating that we've left Africa a long time, but Africa has not left us, and a willingness to work with us in the diplomatic sphere to ensure that Caribbean peoples like ourselves get the benefit of such strong and strengthened diplomacy.
I'll only add to that it is of particular note that Kenya also is leading the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries now, the ACP countries, for the next 3 years. We just came out of that summit in December, and in fact, they do want us to have a point person in Nairobi with them so that we can ensure that we can continue to coordinate. Um, if I put it in context, the Georgetown Agreement, which is the agreement that binds the ACP countries together, was in fact revised in Nairobi in December, so that the ACP grouping will not simply be seen as a grouping for post-colonial trade negotiations with our colonial masters who hitherto existed, but will be seen as a developmental tool beyond trade for African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. So that fully amplifies what Prime Minister Rowley would have just indicated to you. So I believe that these are matters that will advance the interests of Caribbean people as we go forward. It is not in any way intended for us to be acting on our own. As I said, within the region, the OECS have been cooperating on a number of issues, and we believe that as Southern Caribbean neighbors, and let me put it even, I was just in Trinidad and Tobago for the weekend 2 weeks ago, because for those who don't know, I am a music fan and intend to return to music when I leave this job. And thoroughly enjoyed the pan crawl with Prime Minister Rowley. But one of the things that jumped out to me, every other person that I met on that night, if they didn't have a Bajan name, they had family from Barbados, they were coming up to Barbados, they come into We Gathering. This is our year of return, We Gathering. And to that extent, it is impossible, therefore, for us to justify how we can continue to fight hard to bring development to our people and to do it on parallel tracks rather than building a bridge for cooperation as we've done today, again, yet again, between our two countries. And may I say that I hope that we will continue to build those bridges, because it is absolutely essential if we are going to use the limited resources that we have to make the best of what we can. Any questions? We good?
One question.
Okay.
Could we use this opportunity for you to give us an update on the fishing activity between two countries?
As I told you on the last occasion, you weren't here the last time we were in this room, were we? Were you? Because when we were here the last time, we said that the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas allows us to be able to set up enterprises so that if Trinidadians want to come here and fish out of Barbados' exclusive economic zone for longline fishing, they're entitled to do that. And if we want to also establish in Trinidad or Tobago to fish out of there, we're entitled to do that. I hope that at some point, I am livid when I can see the whole Caribbean Sea be treated as the patrimony of the region, and we wouldn't have to rely on rights of establishment going forward. Okay?
Well, just to make a comment there, that one of the things we did in recent times was to invite the private sector to participate in our heads of government discussions. And this fishing issue, it becomes very testy when we don't have the private sector investment, cross-border private sector investment. And we're hoping that somewhere along the line, that that kind of exploitation between Trinidad and Tobago's fishermen and Barbados fishermen would be joint efforts going after the same resource for the service of the tables both in Trinidad and Tobago and in Barbados. I came here a couple of days ago and I was offered very delightful sweet potatoes, but no flying fish with it. So I know that there's room for improvement, right? So we're hoping that very soon.
The truth is, a lot of the flying fish we've been getting have been very small too.
Because
but I think that's more of a climate crisis issue.
A bit of overfishing, because when I was a fisheries officer, one of the things that we worked on was determining how much of those fish we could extract. And of course, you know, they're better caught when they're spawning. How terrible. You're getting your best catch when the fish are breeding, when they're spawning. And we were warned then that if we continue to extract in the way we were, that we will get down to these little ones, and that's where we are.
It's the same problem we're having with lobsters.
Better management is what's required.
Other things across the region. So that we're going to find that we're going to have to work together on a lot of the regulatory issues as well, if we are going to, especially with a climate crisis where the temperatures of the water are bringing new species to areas that they're not accustomed to being. like lionfish. Although I must confess that I haven't seen any lionfish available for sale in Barbados recently.
I don't think they're catching them as fast enough.
The Bajans have found a way of eating them and cooking them beyond. It's actually delicious.
We have to catch them first. Yeah? But like the geological formations, these fish don't acknowledge anybody's border.
That's right.
That's why we need to work in terms of preserving and sustaining the catch. The management of the fisheries need to be a multi-territory exercise. Otherwise, we can end up with problems of overfishing.
And about trying to keep prisoners Prime Minister wrong, does that mean that Barbadian fishermen no longer stand the chance of being?
But when last have you seen a Barbadian arrested in Trinidad?
Let's put it this way: if we overfish the species or we mismanage them, there'll be nobody going to catch any fish anyway. So we want people to come and fish, but we also want to make sure that whoever is fishing, that the fisheries are properly managed in a sustainable way, and that is the biggest of the issue. And it's not only flying fish; there are the other pelagic species as well that need to be managed. And if we manage them well, then we'll have a sustained business going on.
I think part and parcel of what is required from us is to be able to look and to work cooperatively too, to see how we can license better those entities that come in from far and are in fact fishing in our waters more than our own fishermen per se, because our fleets are small in comparison. But we take the point. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Yes, on the unification agreement for the hydrocarbon, how do we determine the shared benefits?
That's being done on the specific unitization agreement. Remember I said there are 3 tiers of agreements. So when that specific agreement comes, but I would imagine that it's not just us, you're going to also have players who are multinationals. So that will be the subject of the specific negotiations.
When you explore, the exploratory wells would be drilled, and there's great transparency in that as to what you drill, what you find. And then you will determine by a number of exploratory wells what you have found, and then you have to do developmental wells to actually develop, to produce. There's technical history, and there's law and practice that governs how you determine what is found. And it really takes the form of a pool. It's like you found a pool of oil down there, 10, 15, 20,000 feet.
Oh, sure.
And then you determine where it is in relation to the actual border. And that determines how much is on this side, how much is on that side. And then the physics of it, in extracting, how you extract. All of those things will be worked out technically in the agreement that flows from the Unitization Treaty, and those are the operational details that the companies, under the supervision of the government agencies, will work out for the extraction of any resource that we find. That's why it takes so long, but it doesn't have to take 20 years.
And that's why we have 3 tiers of agreements. Okay? So we're making progress. Whenever we say the 3rd one, that's really when we did.
But we have to find something first.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.